Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Township of Wainfleet Council meeting January 8th to order. We'll have the national anthem, please. Okay, we'll now have disclosure of any pecuniary interests or general nature thereof. Are there any, Councillor Cridland?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor and Clerk, I have a conflict with one item in the grant report. I sit on the Historical Society Calendar Committee. Thank you.
Okay, that's noted. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I have a personal conflict with the Library Committee. And when we're dealing with that, I will excuse myself from the chair, and Deputy Mayor Gilmore will step in for that. We have no presentations this evening, and we will have our delegation now. Mr. Peter Van Collard, would you like to do your presentation, please?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Peter Van Collard, and I'm the co-chair, along with a fellow co-chair, Kathy Boyko, who couldn't be present this evening, of the Air Race Classic 2019 Terminus Committee. What that entails is the event called the Air Race Classic is an annual cross-country international air race, primarily involving women who are exercising their skills and abilities through the various programs, universities, collegiates, etc., and as well as some women in industry who are career aviators. In their exercising of their skills and talents, they're going to attempt to fly 2,400 miles around North America in a 5-day race that'll culminate at our joint shared municipal aviation asset, which is the Niagara Central Dorothy Rundgling Airport. For those of you who don't know, the airport is one of the few joint assets owned by the 4 southern Niagara municipalities of Welland, Port Colborne, Wainfleet, and Pelham. And this airport has been in existence for 80 years, and over the last several years has seen a renaissance in activity at the airport, industrial development, or commercial development of the airport, as well as individual private hangar ownership. One of the reasons for bringing this event to the airport was to close the circle, because in the 50s, one of the prominent citizens who was involved in the airport back in the day, Dorothy Rundgling, was an air racer herself, and she was not just an air racer, she was an accomplished aviatrix, member of the Order of Canada, a woman in her own right, far in advance of her time, who was exemplary at demonstrating leadership skills in the field of aviation. as an instructor and as a, strangely enough, as a counselor for the Council of Pelham. She had a deep desire to keep air racing alive at the time that she participated, and just before her death of last year, we were able to inform her that we were bringing the Air Race Classic to the airport. And, you know, in an old person's life, I suppose, when you can get them to crack a smile and go back into that place where they have those deep recollections, it brought joy to our hearts to know that she knew before she died that the air race was going to conclude here. Part of that issue was that many of the air races in the past had left from the Niagara Central Dorothy Rungeling Airport long before it was named after her, because she was instrumental in getting many of the air races going around North America. So the real focus of the air race is to really highlight the skills of the participants and the racers. And as far as the council is concerned here, I've presented to you some briefing notes, and I'm not going to read from them because I'm sure you have already read them. But for the benefit of the people who are in attendance here, I would certainly like to explain to them some of the highlights of that so that everybody is sort of on page. This is an air race that is not pitting aircraft speeds against aircraft speeds. It's pitting skill against skill, so that the speed and the complexity of the aircraft are not important. Each aircraft is handicapped for its own abilities, and therefore it rests on the pilots, the team of 2 or 3 people in the plane, to read the weather, read the winds, and chart their courses accordingly, because they don't know where they don't know what the weather's going to be like on the week of the race. They can't do any of the pre-planning until the race actually is underway. This gives them an equal footing, a level playing field in which to compete. As I said, there were 100+ racers. There's over 50 teams. The course is 2,400 miles over 5 days, and it will end at our airport. While the ending is concluded at our airport, there are going to be several public events where the public can be involved. On Friday night, the race ends at 5 o'clock. There's going to be a meltdown party for the racers, and that's a great event for everybody to come and meet the racers and enjoying the little festivities at the airport. The following day, on the Saturday, is a pretty chock-full day with plaque unveilings and a youth aviation seminar, a youth education seminar, as well as an aviation career fair. And this is targeted to women, young women, particularly girls who are in the science, technology, math, and engineering fields, who may not be aware that aviation as a career is open to them as a possibility, and there are really some fabulous programs that support that. So this is a way of bringing that into our community. Our little airport was designed as a training airport for World War II pilots, and it has remained the premier training airport of the Niagara Peninsula. Yes, there's another airport in St. Catharines, but their focus is more on commercial aviation and less on general aviation and aircraft training, which means that we are the feeder airport for the training that the pilots of the future get. And given that the pilots of the future are expected to treble in their numbers in the time between now and 2035, this is a fantastic opportunity to highlight that as a career choice for many individuals. The big deal for the municipality, I suppose, is the economic benefit and the return on investments. There have been some calculations done using pretty standard formulations that have shown that the monies that the Air Race Classic will bring into the community as an economic benefit is just over $650,000. And this is huge, considering that for the kinds of money that we are expending to put the race on, roughly a budget of $40,000. We have targeted to go after public and private funding for this. And when it comes to public funding, we're looking for an ask of 10 cents per capita from each of the municipalities. 10 cents per capita translates in Wainfleet numbers to about $637. That's not enough to fund the entire venture. What it is monies that are needed to go towards some of the prepayment of services that have to be put in place before the race commences. And that's a very modest amount. The other ask we have is that the township consider a quarter-page ad in the magazine that I have supplied to the councillors. And you can see from the quality of this magazine that it's exceptional as a glossy, and it's just filled with information. The racers will get this. This will be distributed at the public events. This is the takeaway official program of the air race itself. So it's the keepsake. It's the keepsake piece. We have the ability to put our information on the rear page. We also have the ability to fill 2 more pages inside the magazine. And my ask of each of the 4 municipalities that share in the ownership of the airport is for each municipality to consider taking out a quarter-page ad. The third ask that I have from this municipality is that the municipality consider naming the days of June 19th to 24th through proclamation as Air Race Week in your community. And I can't see a better way to get the juices flowing within the municipality and within the local area to drum up support for this. And in fact, I'm proud to announce tonight that one of the most encouraging things was that the first person who volunteered outside of the executive committee was an individual who contacted us from Wainfleet. So that's my ask to the municipal council, and I'll be happy to take questions if anybody has some.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collard. Any discussion from council members? Okay, seeing none, do you want to? No discussion.
That council receive the delegation presented by Peter Van Collart, that the delegation request, donation request be referred and included in the discussion of staff report ASR 1 2019 regarding grant applications, and that council refer the proclamation request declaring June 19th to 24 Air Race Week to the June 11th, 2019 council meeting.
And a mover, Councillor Gilmore, seconder, Councillor McClellan. Any further discussions? All in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you very much. Am I to understand that the proclamation will be made in June?
Yes.
Could I ask that you perhaps consider the proclamation earlier, only because I'd like the advantage of advertising that fact?
Okay, we can look at moving that up 1 or 2 meetings ahead. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, public hearings. There are no scheduled public hearings this evening. And now I'll do Mayor's remarks. Firstly, welcome everybody back to the first council meeting after the 1st of January. A new year is upon us, and we're all very excited and looking forward to 2019 as we move Wainfleet into the future. I'd like to thank everybody who attended our levy yesterday, day before yesterday, Sunday. Boy, time's flying. We had about 70 people here. It was held right here in Chambers, and I was very pleased. Councillors expressed their pleasure at the number of residents that showed up. It was really good. We were able to discuss all sorts of items of concern to citizens, so it was an excellent way to communicate with them. I'm continuing to meet with all the local organizations to see how we can help one another. This past week I met with the president of the Niagara Health, and I'm going to be meeting with the president of Brock University and Bridges Community Health Center. One of my goals is to reach out to as many of these organizations as possible and examine ways that we can work together to benefit Wainfleet Township. Niagara Health president is quite excited about helping us with any programs we have in regards to seniors, doctor programs, anything like that at all. And they are actually referring some of their expertise to us so we can use that. So that's excellent. We had our first NPCA board meeting the other day, which I'm a member of, and I think probably everybody saw that in the news. The next board meeting is January the 16th. It's the annual general meeting. I won't be at that one, and it conflicts with the police service board at the same time. So my first obligation is to the police service board. Myself and senior staff will be attending the Building a Disaster Resilient Niagara Symposium on Friday, January 18th. And that is part of our emergency management training for the township. Our next council meeting is on Thursday, January 17th. Should be Tuesday. Well, regional council. Yeah, that's correct. It does say regional. And our next regular meeting of council here is on Tuesday, January 22nd. That concludes my, one more. We received for the T. Roy Adams Humanitarian of the Year Award. Last year, we had Mr. Colin Kruger was elected onto that as a nominee, and he is automatically going to be, he was a runner-up, which means he's automatically going to be reconsidered on that in 2019. And so we're just passing that on to let everybody know that he is in the running for the T. Roy Adams Humanitarian of the Year Award. So congratulations to Mr. Kruger. Okay, now we'll move on to adoption of the minutes.
That the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on December 18th, 2018 be adopted as circulated.
Mover, Councillor Cridlin, seconder, Councillor Van Vliet. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay, move on. Move on now to the administrative staff reports. And for that, I would like to ask Mr. Colosso if he would provide a brief overview of his report.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The first report you have before you this evening is report ASR 40-2018 regarding cannabis retail stores and the municipal option that has been made available to us by the province of Ontario. This report was originally presented to council at its meeting in December, but council at that time requested that the report be deferred until this evening in order to provide an opportunity for members of the public to provide input to members of council via email or through other means to help inform your decision-making process this evening. Once again, the reason this matter is before you is that in the legalization of cannabis in Canada, each province has been afforded an opportunity to establish mechanisms for the retail sale of the now legal cannabis substance. And in Ontario, the province has adopted a two-prong approach to retail sales. One is through a provincially operated online store, electronic store, and the second is through a privatized brick and mortar store system, which will be overseen by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. In establishing the brick and mortar stores, the province has indicated that municipalities do have the option of saying, no, we do not want to have those brick and mortar stores in our municipality. That option is a one-time opportunity for municipalities to opt out by no later than January 22nd of this year. In the event that a municipality opts out at this time, it has the ability to opt back in at a future point in time without any real penalty per se. I'll get to that in a second. If a municipality fails to opt out by January 22nd, then it is locked in as a potential location for retail stores for the future. From an operational perspective, as outlined in the report, there are potential funding aspects associated with the provincial program to establish brick and mortar stores. The Township of Wainfleet has been advised that it will be receiving $5,000 as an initial commitment from the province to the legalization effort, whether we opt in or not. Likewise, there's a second stage allocation of a minimum of $5,000, which would likely also be a maximum in the case of Wainfleet, but another $5,000 to come later this year. In the event that the brick and mortar stores commence operations, there's a further subsidy that may be forthcoming to municipalities to assist in the transition to the legalized cannabis in future years, but that is completely up in the air. At this stage, the report from December is before you, and in addition to that, earlier today, I prepared a further report, memorandum actually, outlining some recent changes that occurred in late December regarding the distribution and allocation of licenses for retail stores. On December 29th, the province published a new regulation in the Ontario Gazette. That regulation was originally enacted on December 13th, but it outlines how in Ontario in the year 2019, there will be 25 licenses for stores being issued by the province, and it allocates those licenses to 5 different geographic areas within the province. Those areas include the Toronto region, which will see up to 5 retail stores being established, the GTA region seeing 6 retail stores, 5 retail stores in the Eastern Ontario region, 2 retail stores in the northerly region of Ontario, and 7 retail stores in the Western region, which is where we are located. And the Western region includes the areas of Dufferin, Wellington, Hamilton, Niagara, Haldimand, Norfolk, Brant, Waterloo, Perth, Oxford, Elgin, Chatham-Kent, Essex, Lambton, Middlesex, Huron, Bruce, Grey, and Manitoulin. So 7 stores in 2019 out of those locations, and the minimum requirement population size for a store is 50,000 people. So that is just breaking news that we've just received from the province. Moving on from there, there has been some information from the province that these stores will be allocated to those locations via a lottery event. The lottery is open to people wishing to open stores. The application date commences January 7th, which was yesterday, and it closes January 9th, which is tomorrow. And the lottery event to actually draw the store operators will be held on January 11th, which is later this week. And the lotteries, as I say, will be allocating the store operations to operators in those areas for 2019. Attached to the report contained in the agenda were a list or the complete comments that were received by the municipality from the public over the last several weeks since the last council meeting. And attached to the memorandum that you have before you today, members of council, is an updated list with all the additional comments that have come in from last week when the agenda was published to earlier this afternoon. So you have now before you a complete list of all the comments received, and we will be making sure that this memorandum and those comments get published to the website as soon as we can so that the members of the public have access to them as well. I should note that all personal information associated with those comments, including names and anything that might identify the individual who submitted those comments, have been removed so that they are anonymized as best as we can. Also attached to the memorandum that's before you this evening is a list of municipalities that have opted out, that have opted in, and that are undecided in the province of Ontario. For the purposes of interest in Niagara region, there are 2 municipalities that have opted out to date that we know about, and those municipalities are West Lincoln and Niagara-on-the-Lake. Thank you. In addition to that information, I was able to attend a meeting of Niagara Regional CAOs yesterday where we did discuss cannabis. We did discuss some of the issues that are facing municipalities regarding cannabis going forward. And one of the comments that was noted was that a number of municipalities have expressed concern about the manner in which the province has rolled out the legalization in the retail store model, and the inability of municipalities to apply planning-related controls to those retail store establishments. And there has been a move amongst municipalities, whether they're opting in or not opting in, to attempt to petition the government, the province of Ontario, to request that the municipalities be given planning controls similar to what's available for certain other uses in municipalities in order to protect the youth, in order to ensure the safety of the public, and so on and so forth. So there is some wording in the memorandum that proposes that whether or not council is interested in opting in, we still nonetheless consider petitioning the province to include those controls or that ability to regulate, because even if council does opt out today or this month, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line, there may be a change of heart, and if council were to opt back in, it would be nice to be able to say, when we do opt back in, if we do, again, not wanting to make a decision for council, but if we do opt in at some point in time, that we have some ability to provide greater control as to the final location of those cannabis retail locations. And in closing, council is currently dealing with the situation of retail stores, but there are other aspects of the legalization of cannabis that are going to be affecting the municipality now and moving forward. And staff are currently working on a comprehensive report to bring back to council that address various issues, including the development of various internal policies dealing with cannabis use amongst employees, amongst staff, amongst members of council, and so forth. Review of the Smoke-Free Ontario legislation as it applies to smoking of cannabis products on municipal property, and as well as review of existing township regulations as they pertain to, for example, medical marijuana, medical cannabis operations, and how or if those types of regulations can be applied to the broader recreational cannabis market. So that is essentially the whole bit of information that Council has before it at the moment. At this stage, if Council's in a position to consider moving ahead with a decision as to whether you want to opt out of the retail sale of cannabis, that is the decision, or that is the type of motion that the province requires by January 22nd. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colossa. Questions, discussion. Councillor McClellan. Your mic.
Excuse me. So the way I understand this is the chances of us getting one in the next year in Wainfleet are slim and none based on population. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. Based on the regulation that was established by the province in December, late December, Wainfleet will not be seeing a retail store prior to December 13th of 2019. That's a guarantee based on the current regulation.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a question for staff. Then is the question maybe now more like for the funding? You talked about the two parts, which are similar to last time, but can you clarify whether you believe the funding that's then available in the future is available only to municipalities that then get structure, or would we believe at this point, and again, these things are going to change, that it might also then be available for access to help with transition in an environment that is already legal for a small town if they'd opt in? So will that just be for bricks and mortar municipalities, or will it be for all of us? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's our understanding that the third round of funding, if you will, which is after the initial 5,000, that third round of funding will be prioritized to those municipalities that have opted in, whether or not they have stores in their municipalities, but it's prioritized to those municipalities that have opted in. That said, the province has not ruled out that funds might go to other municipalities in the event that they are experiencing impacts from cannabis sales. That is, at this moment, totally unclear.
Any other councillors have questions? Councillor Van Vliet?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, what you're saying is if we opt in or opt out, we're still going to get $5,000, and then $5,000 a second round, whether it's a standing store.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we opt in or if we opt out, we are guaranteed, based on the current funding model, $5,000 plus a second $5,000. The use of that money, in accordance with the framework that the province has established, is to be put towards the municipality's efforts to deal with the legalization of cannabis. So we will have $10,000 coming to us, which we are to dedicate or utilize for the cannabis legalization process, whether we opt in or whether we opt out.
Any other questions? Discussion, Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the CAO then, just can you flesh that out a little bit more, because my reading about this, the future potential money that might come had a very specific list of conditions. Are we going to be bound by the same conditions on the $10,000? Because most of those things are items that are managed on our behalf by the region. So I'd like to know what the benefit of that $10,000 potentially is going to be, and exactly how we're going to be able to spend it if we are.
Apologies. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the municipalities, or money that the municipalities receive from the provincial cannabis legalization fund, if you want to call it that, are intended to be used by municipalities to assist or to deal with implementation costs that they experience as a result of the legalization effort. So that could include things such as increased enforcement, whether that's police, public health, by law enforcement services, any sort of thing associated with enforcement. Increased costs associated with dealing with inquiries or dealing with responses to the public about legalized cannabis. Increases in costs for paramedic services, which is an upper tier responsibility here in Niagara. Increased fire service costs associated with the legalization effort, which is something that our fire service could potentially deal with, as well as bylaw and policy development. One of the things I noted that we'll be bringing forward, for example, is a report about our current regulatory scheme as it relates to medical marijuana or medical cannabis. And if we are looking at, for example, expanding or attempting to address the recreational cannabis-related matters through our zoning bylaw or otherwise that require the development of new policies, a zoning bylaw review, anything along those lines, then the money that the province is providing through this cannabis fund could be dedicated towards those types of things.
Any other discussion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, to the CAO, whether we opt out or opt in, we have the option, of course, of joining the petition that you've just brought forward as well.
Through you, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. And staff would recommend that if council would do so, the stronger the voice that comes from all of Ontario's municipalities to the province, the better chance or better likelihood there is of the province considering those types of regulatory reforms to give municipalities some ability to sort of address the very specialized or focused needs that each municipality may have.
Thank you. Then, again, just through your, Mr. Mayor, so we could add that to either an opt-out or an opt-in vote tonight. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Councillor McClellan?
I'd like to put forward a motion that we opt out till we find out what's going on. We've got a year. It's not coming to Wainfleet in the next year. I don't see any rush to jump into this and say go, so I'd like to put that forward.
Okay, we already have a written motion that we're going to vote on here shortly.
Yeah, okay.
At this point, we're just any other discussion at any points that we want to discuss, and then we'll call for that question.
No, I've heard enough, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the motion could have been worded to opt in or to opt out, and so we'll pay attention to the vote as the motion is read. I'll ask the clerk to read the motion. Sorry, Councillor Van Vliet, didn't see you. Hang on.
That's okay, I'm short. It's not really a question as a statement, because we had only 30 responses via email. And 17 of those, can I say that, opted in. 12 opted out, and one was undecided. And that doesn't take into consideration everything we all heard on social media. So I just wanted to put that out there that people they want this.
And that's an excellent point. We should have remarked on that. We did receive 17 comments in favor of opting in and 12, was it, in favor of opting out. But that does not take into account all the personal conversations that people had with us. And throughout the day, phone calls. I had a few phone calls from people. So it's reflective to a point, but it's not inclusive of all the information that the councillors received. So just to make that point. So we'll call the question. We'll read the motion first.
That Administrative Staff Report ASR 40, 2018 regarding cannabis retail sales be received. The council opt out of cannabis retail stores being located in the municipality. That council requests the province of Ontario to provide the township with regulatory authority to further restrict the location of cannabis retail stores based on proximity to municipally sensitive land issues such as community centers, arenas, recreational facilities, youth facilities, and even other cannabis retail stores, and that staff be directed to report back on other issues affecting the municipality related to legalization of cannabis.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And so just to clarify, this is to opt out of accepting stores here in Wainfleet. So may I have a mover? Councillor McClellan. Seconder? Councillor Cridland. I'll call the question. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Gilmore.
Mr. Mayor, I'd request a recorded vote on this matter.
Councillor Cridland.
In favor?
Councillor Gilmore.
In favor.
Councillor McClellan.
In favor.
Councillor Van Vliet.
Opposed.
Mayor Gibson.
In favor. And so that is carried. And just to be clear again, because we're saying in favor, we have just said that we are not opting in to have marijuana stores or cannabis stores here in Wainfleet. So just to be clear on that at this time. Thank you very much for that. And we're moving on to the grant application ASR. Mr. Cross, would you be so kind as to provide a brief overview of that?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. So report ASR 001-2019 is seeking direction from council as to the total amount of funds to be included in the 2019 budget related to municipal grants and donations. And should council choose, based on the applications that we received in November, they can further choose to allocate those funds based on the applications that are in the report.
Thank you very much. Any discussion from the members, councillors? Councillor McClellan.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Not once while walking around town, and I stopped at a lot of houses and talked to a lot of people, did anybody ever ask me to give away their tax dollars. I have a problem with the way this happens right now. We have to look at a different way of doing this. I mean, we sat down, we were told, if we don't raise taxes, we got to cut services. I don't see how we can be giving money away. I hate to sound like the bad guy, but I give my money away. I'm not here to give taxpayers' dollars away.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, I would like to acknowledge the history that we've covered in getting here and bringing such transparency to something that we really didn't have a handle on. So continued transparency in this realm, I think, will get us to the goal that Councillor McClellan has just raised. Now that we're tracking these, the trend, of course, is also a real troublesome point. So the numbers we're seeing today are numbers that have gone up over the past. One thing in the policy, since it's in front of us at the same time, there is something about a split. So it's a minor detail, but if we end up talking about amount, I wouldn't mind that changes so that we could focus any giving that we are going to be doing more directed to Wainfleet. So maybe it's something like up to 20% for Stream 2 and then the rest to Stream 1. So that's just a suggestion, though.
Thank you, Councillor Gridlin. Any other discussion? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor McClellan's point, this definitely has escalated a lot since definitely in this decade. I believe roughly in 2010 the numbers were in the $16,000 range, and now if you add the aggregate total, it's probably close to 55 with everything. Now there's been some tweaking with moving the airport commission and some obligatory fees that are out of this policy, but this policy has been in the works for some time. And there's also, I think that for the benefit of the rest of council, a lot of the money is not so much giving away as giving back to groups within the township. So you have to, in my mind, consider where it's going and who it's going to, and so I would recommend. I definitely concur with Councillor McClellan that we need to start to rein this problem in, and so I believe the treasurer's looking for a sort of a top line number for now, and then he'll come back to us with the impact of what that number is to all the user groups that would potentially be affected. So I don't think it's productive at this point for us to get into the detail until he gets back to us with exactly how it's going to impact. But he is looking for a top line number. So I'm prepared to say that I actually have two issues that I'd like to deal with. The first one would be to give the treasurer a top line number of 30,000 down from the 41,400 that is laid out in the report. Further to that, there is a line that I'm aware of in the budget for council has a grant line separate from the policy, which last year I believe was $9,000, and so I'd like to recommend that the treasurer reduce that number when he prepares the budget to $3,000, which would just gives us a little bit of cushion if things come up through the year, which they always do every year in my experience. There's been things that have come up. To deal with things that may come up. That doesn't mean we're going to spend that money, but then that $6,000 can come out of that comes out of the big picture. When I referred to the 55, I was referring to that number being in there too. So I'm glad to see that it's being tidied up, and as the treasurer knows, we've talked about this numerous occasions in the last term. So just to reiterate, my motion then would be that the top line number for 2019 be $30,000, and that covers both streams. As far as the comment from Councillor Cridlin about the percentage, that I don't want to complicate this, but I mean that's certainly something that we can consider. The up to part, I think, is sort of inherent in how we're going to deal with it when we get to the budget deliberations. So sorry, I'm rambling a bit. So we're going to go back to $30,000 top line number and instruct the treasurer when he brings back the budget to reduce the council grant line from 9,000 to 3,000.
Thank you, Councillor Gilmore. In conversation that I had with Mr. Cross, we're currently almost 1% of the total budget of Wainfleet goes into the grant process. And we discussed dropping it more reasonably to about 0.5%, and with the majority, just about all of that money going strictly to Wainfleet causes. Unless it was something that there was a vast number of Wainfleet people were involved in something, that would be a different story. But to really bring our Wainfleet tax dollar back home to Wainfleet causes. And so I think probably that 0.5% would be lower than the 30,000 in discussion. And so I think Mr. Cross seemed to be a little bit more comfortable with that as we move forward. Of course, everything is flexible as time goes on. Next year we can revisit it and see how it works this year. But certainly 1% of our tax dollars is a lot of money. And Councillor McClellan's comments about, it's taxpayers' dollars. It's really important we spend it properly. And so I would like to amend that motion to 0.5% if we could, because I think that's going to be lower than the 30,000. Is that possible?
We're slightly out of order, but if I'm happy to reduce the number to 25, but we did have a motion on the floor, so shouldn't have really had any further discussion. However, so to clean it up, if I'm happy to amend the number to 25, and we will we'll see what the impact of that is when it comes to budget time, and we may or may not be happy with that. So if that's acceptable to the clerk, then I'll amend my motion, which has yet to be seconded, to 25,000, and then also include my other part, if that's acceptable to you. But we do need a seconder.
Okay, may we have a seconder for Councillor Gilmore's motion, please? Certainly. Councillor McClellan?
Could we make it up to 25%?
Well, I'm just informed that we need a seconder first for Councillor Gilmore's. Councillor McClellan will second it. Further discussion?
Could we make it up to 25%, not a mandatory 25%? Or 0.5%, I'm sorry.
Certainly, I think that wording would be acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have the clerk read that. From the treasurer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council, it would actually be cleaner for me if we just picked a number and not picked a percent of a number that has yet to be determined, because then I'm kind of stuck in the same spot. So based on 2018's budget, $50,000 is 1%. So if we're saying half, we get to the 25 for my benefit.
Okay, is that any further discussion on that, Councillor Gilmore?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to be clear, to Mr. Councillor McClellan's point, it doesn't force us to spend all the money. So we're just setting an upper limit. We're getting from a runaway train to a cap, which is a big step. So and the rest of these details have to be fleshed out in what will become several lengthy budget meetings. Trust me.
Okay, any other further discussion on that point? Okay, so just so that we're all clear, we'll have the clerk read the motion.
That Administrative Staff Report ASR 1 2019 regarding grant applications be received, that the total amount to be included in the 2019 budget for municipal grants and donations be $25,000. That council determine the allocation of said amount during 2019 budget deliberations. That staff be directed to report back with a proposed distribution of municipal grant funds and its impacts. And that the treasurer reduce in the 2019 budget the council grant line from $9,000 to $3,000.
Okay, Councillor Gilmore was the mover on that. Seconder, Councillor McClellan. Any other further discussion? All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, we'll now deal with ASR 0022019, the 2018 Municipal and School Board Election Accessibility Report. Ms. Corbett, would you like to provide a brief overview of that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This staff report ASR 2-2019 is a requirement of the Municipal Elections Act at which the clerk outlines in a report identifying and the removal of barriers for electors and candidates with disabilities throughout the election process, and how those things are accomplished. This report merely outlines those requirements as dictated by the Act, and it also it provides just an additional measure that can be taken for the next election if council wishes, or upon staff direction or council direction to staff to increase further accessibility and include measures in addition to the vote by mail system, but not in lieu of.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett. Any discussion? Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the report, Margaret. I think that we should flag this to be reviewed in the spring of 2021 in case there's any issues. You make reference to the potential of a polling station, one polling station, which has some implications, cost implications, but just to make sure that that we're not missing any action steps. Other than that, you're just requesting it be received for information, but if staff would flag it, we'll have a look at it.
Any other discussion? Councillor Cridland.
And I would just like to add, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add also the comments. Given those suggestions, I think, am I correct that we had a small drop in voter turnout? And again, as Councillor Gilmore said, we would have a chance to revisit that when we bring it forward. So thank you again for the report.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to read the motion.
That administrative staff report ASR 2-2019 regarding the 2018 municipal and school board election accessibility report be received for information.
And can I have a mover? Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Gilmore, all in favor? And that report is received. Thank you. Okay, we're now moving into the board and committee appointments, and this is where I have a conflict. However, we're going to deal with the Regional Transportation Committee, the Airport Committee, and the Drainage Committee first, and then we'll deal with the library after. And I'll ask Mrs. Corbett to do a review of that report, please.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to, as a continuation from the last report that was brought to council at the end of 2018, just to further conclude the appointment process, to appoint members of council to the Township of Wainfleet Library Board, the Drainage Advisory Committee, and the Niagara Transportation Steering Committee, and to further appoint citizen to look at the citizen applications and to appoint those people to the various boards. I do want to inform council and just to update them at this time that further applications were brought forth past the due date. 9 applications for the Committee of Adjustment, 7 applications for the Library Board, and 5 applications for the NPCA. Those are different from the numbers that were in the original report, but I'd like that just to be stated so that everyone knows what to expect. And further, asking that council direct staff to facilitate an appointment policy when looking at agencies, boards, and committees in the Township of Wainfleet going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Corp.
Mr. Mayor, through you to members of council, in light of the delegation this evening, there's one other appointment that we would like to bring to your attention as staff. Normally, all the appointments that we have are supported by formal documentation requesting appointments to various agencies, boards, and committees. There is one body, the Board of Directors for the Niagara Central Dorothy Rungling Airport, that Township has historically appointed a member of council to sit on. We have not yet received formal communications, correspondence from that board requesting that we make such an appointment. However, in addition to councillor appointments tonight to the Library Board, the Drainage Advisory Committee, and the Regional Transportation Steering Committee, council may wish to also appoint one of its own to sit on the Niagara Central Dorothy Rungling Airport Board of Directors, just to make sure that we have all the possible external agencies covered off. So that's one additional appointment that we'd recommend you make for a member of council this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Is there any discussion from any councillors? Councillor Gilmore was thinking about it, changed his mind. Any discussion? Councillor McClellan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Will. My wife sat on the library board. She's done. Do I have a conflict?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, although I cannot give legal advice, if your wife is not presently an applicant, then it's safe to say that you're not going to be impacting this in any way, shape, or form. So although I cannot give legal advice, I think you're okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so what we're going to do, because we have, I think it's 4 committees here that we're going to populate. I'm going to ask the clerk to, we're going to do them individually, and I'll ask the clerk to read each one. And the first motion, would you read that one, please, Madam Clerk?
Okay, so we're going to break this up into 2 separate motions. The first motion being to receive the report, and the second to appoint each councillor to their specific board or committee. So that Administrative Staff Report ASR 3 2019 regarding board and committee appointments be received, that council review and select 5 citizen appointments for the Committee of Adjustment, Fence Viewers, Property Standards Committee, Dog Control Bylaw Appeals, 4 citizen appointees for the Library Board, and 1 citizen appointee to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, that council appoint 1 member of council to the Library Board, that council appoint 1 member of council to the Drainage Advisory Committee, that council appoint 1 member of council to the Transportation Steering Committee, and that council directs staff to create an appointment policy outlining practices and procedures for future appointments to various agencies, boards, and committees within the Township of Wainfleet.
Okay, may I have a...
Excuse me, and the Niagara Dorothy Rungling Airport as well.
Thank you. Okay, a mover for that, please. Councillor Van Vliet, seconder. Councillor Cridland. Any discussion on that? Mr. CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. One of the recommended appointments that was listed there, I believe, was one citizen member to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. In light of the uncertainty that currently exists with respect to appointments to that agency, it may be worthwhile for council not to proceed with a citizen appointee at this time, pending further information coming from either the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority and or the Niagara region regarding the manner in which that board is to be populated in the future. As I guess my recommendation would be that that motion that was just proposed be amended before it is moved and seconded in order to withdraw that Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority appointment, because currently we don't know the final shape that that appointment will take.
Thank you, Mr. Colossa. And sitting on temporarily on the NPCA interim board, it's for 3 months. It's going to be in March before we actually assemble the permanent board. So we do have time, and there's no need to rush on that. So can I have a mover for this, please? Go ahead.
Since we're not going to do anything till March, can we receive more applications, or is the deadline the deadline? Are we done?
Mr. Colossa?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is totally at the discretion of council. If there is further applications that roll in, as is our normal practice, we will assemble those and present those to council so that you have them if and when a decision is required to be made by council.
Thank you. And that would be important to put that on our website and make it available to the residents that they can still apply. I did receive one like the night before that they thought they were too late, and I referred that to you. So we'll have to make sure we advertise that and put an end date on that as well. Councillor Gilmore? Okay, we have to do a seconder first of all for the amendment.
Right, that's where I was going. So so the amendment has been moved by Councillor McClellan. I did it. I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? And that is passed. Okay, so now we're going to go through the steps of having councillors appointed to the various committees. And I would like to propose, there is some interest by the councillors in various positions already. And so I would like to see if Mr. Gilmore, if you propose to work with the library committee. That is a positive there. I would like to see if Councillor Cridlin would be interested in working with the... Okay, so we'll do each one separate there. So I make a motion that Councillor Gilmore be assigned to the library board committee. That's right. Yes, I have to step away for that because I have the conflict of interest. Okay, so.
Mr. Mayor, can I just suggest that you're just proposing names for now, if we have any discussion, and then we'll vote on each one individually. So just finish your thoughts about who should do what, and then we'll deal with them individually.
Okay, and then so Councillor Cridlin for Regional Transportation Committee, and Councillor McClellan for the Airport Committee, and Councillor Van Vliet for the Drainage Committee. need to do a motion on each one of these now, and we'll do the library one last, so now I'll step away. So I make a motion for Councillor Van Vliet to be assigned to the Drainage Committee. Mover for that. Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Gilmore, all in favor? That's carried. And make a motion now for Councillor McClellan to be assigned to the Airport Committee. Make a seconder on that motion. Seconder, Councillor Cridland. All in favor? That's carried. And Councillor Cridland to be assigned to the Regional Transportation Committee. We need a motion for that. Councillor Van Vliet, a seconder. Councillor McClellan, all in favor, and that is carried. And I will excuse myself. Deputy Mayor Gilmore will take the Library Committee.
Thank you. I'll ask the clerk to read the motion for the Library Board.
That Councillor Gilmore be appointed to the Township of Wainfleet's Library Board for the current term of council, and that staff be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw for consideration at the January 22nd, 2019 council meeting.
Thank you, mover. Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Cridland. I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Gilmore. Now we'll move into the building staff reports.
Before we do that, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification for members of public in the gallery and the people watching at home, the council will be dealing in closed session later this evening with the citizen appointees to those various agencies, boards, and committees. Those items that will be considered in closed session include quite a bit of personal information about the individual applicants, including resumes, life experiences, etc. So in accordance with the Municipal Act, Council will be dealing with those applications in closed session and then resuming an open session later in the meeting to come forward potentially with recommendations for citizen appointments to those boards.
Thank you. We'll move on to the building staff reports. Mr. DeGuire is not here this evening. And so is there any, I guess we'll move right to discussion from any of the members in reviewing the report. Will the clerk then read the motion?
The building staff report BSR 1 2019 regarding monthly statistical report be received for information.
Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Van Vliet, seconder. Councillor Gilmore, any further discussion? Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. And now we'll move to the fire staff reports. I'll ask Captain Alcock to provide a brief overview. Captain, you got promoted.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To council, in 2018, the previous council purchased 3 fire trucks, 1 pumper, 1 tanker, 1 rescue. Part of that was a fleet replacement plan, a 1996 Ford pumper and a 1989 Ford tanker, both of which has been since removed from service. And so I'm seeking direction as to how council wants to dispose of it. We have 3 options. We can sell them, online auction or listings. We can donate them to various charities that move that equipment to developing countries, or we can, if you guys so choose, retain them as spare apparatus. In my report, I have outlined various financial implications of those various options.
Thank you, Chief. Can we have a motion to receive that report? Wait, first, any discussion on that before we have the motion? The three options. Go ahead, Councillor Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move that we proceed with option 1.
Okay, and option 1, just for the gallery, would result in potential combined revenue of selling it approximately and potentially $10,000, selling that equipment. Yeah, we'll ask for the motion on that now, please.
That fire staff report FSR 1 2019 regarding disposal of surplus fire apparatus be received, and that the fire chief be authorized to dispose of the surplus fire apparatus by listing the item for sale in accordance with normal practices.
And the mover on that is Councillor Gilmore. Seconder, Councillor McClellan. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, the review of correspondence. We have no correspondence this evening to review. And we move to bylaws.
That the following bylaws be read and passed this 8th day of January 2019. Bylaw number 1, 2019, being a bylaw to appoint a deputy mayor for the Township of Wainfleet. Bylaw number 2, 2019, being a bylaw to provide for interim tax levies for the year 2019 for the Township of Wainfleet. Bylaw number 3, 2019, being a bylaw to authorize borrowing from time to time to meet current expenditures during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019.
May we have a mover for that, please? Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Cridlin, and discussion. Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, we're moving down to notices of motion. There are no notices this evening of motion. Proclamations, we have none. Other business, do council members have any other business? Okay, seeing none. And we're at the, we're going to go to close now. I have a motion to go to closed session, please.
The council now move into closed session to discuss item under section 239, 2C of the Municipal Act 2001, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. One item, potential acquisition of land. Item under section 239, 2E of the Municipal Act 2001, litigation or potential litigation including matters before an administrative tribunal affecting the municipality or local board. One item, drainage matter. Item under section 239, 2B of the Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. One appointment, consideration of applications to various boards and committees. And minutes of the closed meeting of council held on December 18th, 2018.
Can we have a mover for that, please? Councillor McClellan, seconder. Councillor Van Vliet, all in favor? That is carried, and we'll now go into closed session.